What's up, everybody? Welcome back. I'm Brian Jester, co-founder here at Occupy Fantasy, and we are here with some UFC DFS picks and lineup advice for both FanDuel and DraftKings for UFC 258, Usman versus Burns. I'm joined today by Jake McIntyre of MMA DFS.com. What's happening, Jake?
Not a whole lot, man. How are you?
Good. Glad to get another pay-per-view slate here with some big prizes, especially on DraftKings. In this video, we're going to talk about that main event, Usman versus Burns, and what it means for your DFS lineups. We're going to talk about some of the UFC newcomers and those who don't have that much data on their record, discuss some low-owned FanDuel MVPs, and discuss our favorite underdog plays and maybe our favorite non-main event fight to target. Before we get started, go ahead and click that subscribe button below. That way you get access to all of our latest videos here on YouTube as soon as they're released. Give us a thumbs up. If you like this video, we appreciate that. Any questions you have, you can comment on this video below, or you can join our live Twitch stream tomorrow. Jake's going to join us as well, twitch.tv/OccupyFantasy, where we'll do a live Q&A and break down this UFC DFS slate. So, Jake, let's jump into it. Usman versus Burns. This fight should be explosive for DFS purposes, but as we know, DraftKings changed their scoring recently, and probably the biggest beneficiary of the scoring change has to be Kamaru Usman.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if you look at his numbers before and after, it's crazy. I mean, he racks up like 51% control time on average. He's landing just a ton of strikes in the clinch that wouldn't have been scored before. Now they are. I mean, he's dominating with the new rules.
Yeah, absolutely. His scores have been through the roof in this new scoring system, and it's not like it's going to slip by anyone. We expect him to be the highest owned fighter on the slate in the 60% range on DraftKings. And Gilbert Burns, his opponent, going to be relatively popular as well as a 5-round fighter. What is your take on this fight as a whole for how we handle it in low-risk contests on both sides, and then how much we need of it in our high-risk lineups?
Yeah, so I think this is one of the ones in low risk where you just stack it. You look to try to jam in value elsewhere, but you guarantee you lock in the 100+ points by stacking it in low risk. And then in high risk, I think you want to be heavy on Usman. I mean, it's hard to get away from that. If Burns does win, and if you look at the Vegas odds, they give him like a 31% chance of winning. Then I think he's definitely going to be in the optimal as well. So you want to have some, and I don't see a reason to build any lineups without one of these two fighters based on the slate we're looking at.
Yeah, there's some main events that we've talked in the past about how maybe you don't need 100%. There are chances where they don't end up in the optimal lineup, but this definitely looks like one of those fights where whoever wins has a really, really, really good chance of being in the optimal lineup. And especially if you're making 20 or less lineups, it definitely looks like you want either Usman or Burns in all of your lineups. Now let's talk about some of these UFC newcomers, those that lack some data points. We have one making their true UFC debut in Phil Rowe. And he's facing Gabe Green, who has just one UFC fight under his belt. Miranda Maverick is making her second UFC fight. And Rodolfo Vieira has fought in the UFC twice, but neither fight has gone the distance, so not a ton of data to go off of. On these four fighters, if you could educate the viewers on your first thoughts on them and what their first or second fights in the UFC means for their overall DFS picture.
Yeah, so we got Rowe making his UFC debut here. I think he's only defeated one fighter in the past with a winning record. So I mean that kind of stands out as a red flag. He's coming off over a year layoff after a win on Dana White's Contender Series. He had a couple fights canceled last year. He's going against Gabe Green, who he made his debut on very short notice against Daniel Rodriguez, and he actually looked great. He landed like 127 significant strikes. He did get punched in the face 175 times in that fight, but he showed the volume to be a great contributor for DFS. So I think whichever one of those guys wins, they're going to have a great showing. And we don't know what to expect out of Rowe. He's a finisher, but he hasn't really gone up against decent competition. So it's hard to say there. Moving on to Vieira. He's a jiu-jitsu world champion who he's kind of a one-dimensional fighter. He's exceptional on the ground, but he really doesn't have much of a striking game. And we've only seen a little bit of him in two fights because he's finished the fight so quickly. So I think he could potentially get exposed in the striking game at some point. I don't know if this is the matchup where it happens, but it could. So it's it's one of those things where we're hoping that Fluffy Hernandez can show up and kind of expose the lack of striking ability from Vieira. And then looking at Maverick, she's 1-0. She's been in the UFC for 5 minutes, where she went against an armbar specialist. And, we thought that was going to be a grappling match, and it turned into a striking battle where Maverick landed 49 significant strikes and busted the nose open of her opponent, and the fight got called after the first round. So we haven't seen any of her grappling. But she's going to come in. She's going to be super high owned, and she gets a very technical advanced grappler in Jillian Robertson, who's coming off a loss where she looked terrible. So she's going to be low owned. So it seems like a good buy low spot on Robertson. And, we don't know what we're going to get from Maverick yet on the ground.
Yeah, that's the big thing with these fighters that don't have a lot of data. I think, Jake, probably the sweet spot is fighters who have one fight, because the data that we do have ends up being weighted more heavily than it should than if we had 2 or 3 fights, or even if we just had access to their pre-UFC data. Because Miranda Maverick now has a great DraftKings score in her game log. People think that's the baseline, when in reality, I know you weren't that high on her coming into the UFC.
Yeah, I mean, I think my write-up was pitter-patter punches, and then she gets a round 1 KO. So, I mean, we're not expecting that. She had no KOs coming into the UFC. I think she had 6 wins by submission. She looked like a pure wrestler. She's still young. She's like 22 or something. And then she comes in and breaks someone's face open and, makes me look like an idiot.
But it goes to show that there's a wide range of outcomes, especially in the newer fighters, and we can take advantage of what the field thinks they know best. And that's always the case in UFC DFS. Now, let's get away from the main event and some of these newer fighters. I guess I'm not even going to get away from these newer fighters, because my answer for this next question involves the newer fighters. I want to ask about your favorite non-main event play. And for me, Jake, it is that matchup between Green and Rowe. Both those guys rank in the top half of our model, which means it's a fight to target. Should be tons of volume. Both guys, especially Rowe, have high KO chances, and their middle of the pack pricing gives them a great chance to end up in the optimal lineup no matter who wins. I want to get your take on that fight and any other fight that you're looking to target, or fighter that you're looking to target that's not in the main event.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you on the Green Rowe fight. I think that the winner of that most likely ends up in the optimal lineup. I mean, there's a chance that there's no grappling, and the winner, like if you look at Green's last score, I think he would have scored like 81 had the decision gone his way. But, that wasn't a losing effort. Normally people score better when they win. So I think the winner of that fight's going to land a ton of strikes. Maybe we even see a few takedowns. Who knows? But another fighter I'm looking at that's priced just below them is going to be Macy Barber, who she's coming off a year-long layoff. She tore her ACL completely against Roxanne Modafferi last year. I don't know if you guys saw that fight, but a doctor comes into the ring and kind of Mr. Miyagi's her knee. He's like, no, she's fine. It's a partial MCL tear. She's good to go. Then after the fight, they're like, yeah, she completely tore her ACL.
Solid work, doc.
Yeah, everyone on the cast was like, man, we gotta get this doctor coming around. Like, that guy is good. He's a walking MRI machine. And then he was just completely wrong. But so Macy Barber is coming off the year-long layoff. So people have kind of forgotten her, but she's coming off 6 straight wins. She was 3-0 in the UFC. She's 3-1 now, because after tearing her knee, she basically ground out a 3-round decision. She tore her knee at the beginning of the fight and still made it all the way to a decision that she lost. But I mean, she was on one leg. But she is a knockout artist. I mean, she just comes in there and just pummels people. So she has a tough opponent here, which is why she opened as the underdog. But the line has already moved 20 points in her favor. And I think there's a great chance that she gets a finish, and she's priced at $7,900 on DraftKings and $15 on FanDuel.
Yeah, all great points there, Jay. Got to like Macy Barber, especially as a high upside play, and actually maybe a low risk play as well. And I think if you read the daily plug, what you see on screen here, OccupyFantasy.com, Jake highlights his top plays and his lineup strategies for the slate. You can read about Macy Barber, which again you do see on screen here. All right, Jake. As we know, if you want to win a tournament, you have to find those underdogs that get the win and likely win big. Give me one name you're looking at that is an underdog, that has lowered ownership, that has a chance to win us a tournament.
I think Brian Kelleher is in a great spot. He's coming off a loss. I'm sorry, he's coming off a win. But the important thing is you look at his matchup. He's going against Ricky Simone, who is on a quick turnaround, moving up a weight class. He's going to be super high owned after he scored like 130 points against a guy making a short notice UFC debut in his last match. Brian Kelleher has the Boumatine, as he calls it, which is his guillotine choke that I think he's landed like 6 round 1 finishes with it, where every time people shoot a takedown, he either stuffs the takedown or he goes for the guillotine. So wrestlers generally have a tough time with him. He went against Cody Stamann, who is, just a better fighter than him. And Cody Stamann only went for half as many takedowns as he normally goes for. And that one didn't go Brian's way, but I think this is a really good spot against Simone with a ton of red flags. Kelleher has 5 of his 6 finishes. 5 of his 6 fights have ended in finishes, his wins in the UFC. He's just a guy that has scored well in every one of his wins, and now we get him priced near the bottom of the slate. And on FanDuel, he can defend takedowns, and Simone leads the entire slate on both takedowns landed, attempted, and missed. So, he has the potential to really rack up points on FanDuel from takedowns defended.
You convinced me, Jake. Sign me up. I'll be playing a ton of Brian Kelleher in tournaments on Saturday night slate. And let's close out the show with some FanDuel strategy. As we know, you've had success over there. I've had success with playing low-owned MVPs. We know the big knockout artists, the high favorites, the main event favorites are going to be the most popular at MVP. However, if we get a winner who's way less owned than them and scores more points, that's how we take those top spots without anybody else impeding our progress and duplicating our lineups. So give me 1 or 2 names that you're looking at that are going to go way low owned at MVP that can help win us the tournament over there.
Yeah, so I like the 2 guys I mentioned, Barber and Kelleher, but I think there's some other people you could look at beyond that. Guys like Fluffy Hernandez, if he somehow pulls off the upset, you get a huge leverage spot. Maybe he finishes Vieira early, and then there's guys like Chris Gutierrez. I think Rowe is in a good spot. He's a finisher. People aren't going to want to play the $14 guy on FanDuel. Everyone wants to, MVP the $20 plays. And if Burns does win somehow, then there's a good chance that he would end up as the MVP. And most people probably won't play him at MVP.
So if you take away one lesson here, play an underdog at MVP in the big tournaments on FanDuel. They'll go 1 to 5% owned, and you have massive leverage over the field. They have to win anyways. You have to get all 6 of your fights right to win a tournament. Why not put the underdog in MVP? Because if they win, you get the extra leverage if they score the most on the slate. So great information from Jake. If you like his work, you can check out MMADFS.com. Look at the sheet where he writes up every fight on the slate, giving DFS and betting advice. You can also read his work in the Daily Plug, OccupyFantasy.com, where he lists his top plays for FanDuel and DraftKings, as well as his favorite bets for the slate. So for Jake, I'm Brian. Appreciate you listening, and good luck in UFC 258.